There you go.
That probably would help. You know.
So,
What if we
we
hired some massage expert? Everybody gets a massage.
massage experts?
We get a table set up in the next room. You get.
I don't know. I would have thought Great Pizza and Beer would do it. You know, your t-shirts, you know. Well, but, so, yes, welcome to the Chicago Sencha User Group. I'm going to quickly run through our sponsors to highlight them before we jump into content. Sencha, the sponsors are in official capacity, but you're paying for some awesome swag giveaway, in this case, t-shirts, as well as paying for some Marmita.com costs. CNX is the office you find yourself in at the moment. Thank you, Richard, for hosting us, giving us food. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
We also brought Nielsen on board. Starting in September, they're going to host a meeting randomly at their office in Schaumburg. They will also provide venue and food on occasion.
Down some music.
And last but not least, JetBrains, when we do hit a certain number of attendees, and we'll have to get about JetBrains today. Next time. So, as always, looking for to speak, things to speak about, give away, sponsorship in some way, shape, or form. So, it's all right. So, without further ado, we are going to have lightning talks today. And Chad didn't show up for context objects. I'm going to jump in another presentation on Apple Spectre, which totally leading, so feel free to shout out questions. And then we'll have plenty of time for Brian talking about visual effects and Sencha Touch. Forward to hearing about that. So, yeah, my name is Art. I work for Sencha. I'm our developer relations manager based here in Chicago. For everybody, those of you know me, so I'm. And Apple Spectre is a project near and dear to my heart. It's something I have done probably 90% of the development on. If you're familiar with Google Chrome's developer tools, at a high level, Apple Spectre is just an extension of the developer tools that's specific to the Sencha frameworks. A few months ago, I wrote a blog, which you see here on screen, that goes into a lot of detail about what it is, what it includes, fancy diagram explaining how Chrome extensions work. I'm going to kind of dive into some of these nitty-gritty details and additionally show what it is. But quickly, if you want to install it, simply go to the Chrome Web Store, which you can either link to off of the Sencha blog, we've got an awesome link available right here, or you can go to the Chrome Web Store and search for Sencha. You can one-click install directly from there. Apple Spectre is an open source project through Sencha Labs, so you can see all of our source code freely available. You can make pull requests and contribute to it, which is something that I would actively encourage you to do for any number of reasons, but the biggest one being was to make Apple Spectre more awesome. So I can go through the code, but I'll show you some of the really cool stuff in just a minute. One thing to note, our master branch is what the current stable version is on the Chrome Web Store. We've got the super secret PHP5 upgrade branch right now. A bunch of really cool features which I'm going to demo for you today. So, by super secret, I mean it's one click away from being actually publicly visible. It's not really all that secret. The source code is still pretty available. So before I dive into the code, let me just explore what Apple Spectre is. So on the right-hand side, we've got my Google Chrome DevTools panel. All the things we're used to seeing, things like my elements pane, like network resources, timeline profiles, all the stuff that we're used to in our JavaScript console. So see the Sencha tab over here on the far right. I can zoom in on that. There we go, Sencha. Click that, and then you actually see App Inspector for Sencha. Let me just refresh this. And the first feature I'm demoing for you is that App Inspector actually refreshes with the application. This is pretty cool. So right off the bat, what App Inspector does is gives you intelligent information about your Sencha application, whether it's Sencha Touch or XJS. It supports Sencha Touch 2.3 and up, which is the current stable version, as well as XJS 4 and XJS 5. So unless you're using XJS 3 or Sencha Touch 1 or something really, really old, then App Inspector works in just about anything I would expect to be doing development on these days. So you can see right now this application that is over here on the left is running Sencha Touch 2.3. Tells me what my application namespace is, as well as some other bits. The App Inspector is a great way to get information about the application that you might not have otherwise been able to glean from things like your elements panel. So you look at the elements panel, and we see like 10,000 div elements. And if you're spending enough time in Chrome developer tools or some other graphics developer tools, you may be very familiar with a lot of the CSS classes that we see in the elements pane. So I can probably pick out any one of these divs and actually tell you what that correlates to, but most people can't. And so that's where something like components tab of App Inspector comes in handy. Where you see a HTTP viewport, the top up it highlights it for me. I can dive into some of the individual views. You can see a title bar at the top. So rather than sifting for div elements, I can actually see something more useful about the application. We're also at, I don't know why this is all grayed out here, so I'm curious. Refresh this there. I'm using the unstable version of App Inspector. Components. Maybe I'll click on report. I don't know why this is all grayed out here. It's making me happy. Let's try it. Oh, okay, so for whatever reason, the message touch out was breaking out, but where I'm going with this is over here on the right-hand bit of my components tab, we can see a tab panel full of a variety of other information, things like the properties that are defined on this particular component, what methods there are, if those methods are they're overriding a method on the prototype chain, or if it's a custom defined method. You can see some of these things here highlighted in colors. If this application, or sorry, if this component we're using things like MVVM and XJS5, it will tell us some more information about what bits of data are bound. If I have a view model, what data might be in here. Let me perhaps find a better example here so I can actually showcase that. Let's do a dynamic. And so dig into over here. This one's not there. Yeah, I told you I was doing this. Let's try this again. Here we go. Okay, so now I got the AVM binding, where I can see that certain keys are bound to certain properties on a U model, what their values are. It's kind of cool about this particular piece of app inspector is that if you incorrectly bound something, meaning if you misspelled one of the bindings, if you left out the L in HTML, app inspector is smart enough to find that for you and will highlight that in red. That's kind of a interesting feature. And then inspecting the model, you can see what data has actually been bound to this component's view model. So, also a very useful feature. One of the really new things we've done in this branch, and this is not in the public release, this is just on the GitHub repo. We have a D3 visualization tree for this particular object. So you can see that my view extends from panel, which in turn extends from container, it inherits from Docker container, and all the way down the rabbit hole here. So this applies to any object that we try to inspect. And actually open and close these arrows too. So this is all done through D3.js. We find this to be particularly helpful as well. If you're trying to figure out why, let's say you've overridden some mix-in on a class, and you don't know why it's not showing up. Well, looking at the inheritance model would tell you if it's correctly been inherited from. So that's our components tab. Stores, as you might expect, actually shows you what stores are in the applications. Begin to browse the data. The layouts tab is more of a performance and debugging sort of utility, and that's we found in such as professional services that many customers suffer from performance issues when you've got layouts that are used incorrectly. So if you're over nesting your layouts for whatever reason, or if you're using too many box layouts, you've got H box inside of V box inside of H box. Those sorts of things can contribute to performance problems. So we've got utilities for identifying those, just to make you aware of them, so you can go back and check on the usage. That's another point. And then also things like monitoring your layout runs. So as I interact with the application, it'll tell me how many layouts the XJS or Sencha Touch layouts have physically had to do, so that we can inspect what components were part of that layout, so we can tweak performance by reducing the number of layouts that happen in the application. In order to do that, you have to know when they happen. Similar thing with events. You want to record what events are happening in the application. And as you're interacting with things, you can see what XJS or Sencha Touch events are happening, not necessarily the browser level events. Again, the app inspector is here to make debugging your Sencha apps more intelligent versus what you already got out of the box in Chrome developers. Last but not least, we have an MVC inspection, so you can see what controllers are monitoring the application at a global level, what events are being listened for by who, and what methods get executed off of that. So this app inspector that are pretty obvious level. And if you had installed this, you could have poked around and figured a lot of that out yourselves. What I wanted to do is to quickly go over how app inspector works under the hood. It's actually an interesting feat of engineering, at least in my opinion. So what I've got on the screen is a diagram of how a Chrome extension works, and by proxy, it's how Abstract works. The first bit of it is your inspected window. So that's the actual application. That's not really a piece of App Inspector, but you have to understand that that's like a separate entity in the architecture of how a Chrome extension works. Because you can look at execute code from App Inspector within the inspected window. So in some sense, that could be a security concern, but thankfully you all know and trust Sencha, so you're more than fine with us running code in the context of your application. That's just a necessary evil to make App Inspector work. Behind that sits the background page. The background page is common to all Chrome extensions. It's basically the starting point of making any bit of code, whether it be an extension of Chrome DevTools or just an extension of Chrome by itself, be a Chrome application. They all run on background JS, background HTML file. So when Chrome starts, it fires up your background page. So whatever you do in the background page gets executed once and will live throughout the lifecycle of all tabs in Chrome. And it's different than the DevTools page you see here on the bottom. DevTools page is one instance per tab. So as you might anticipate, there are some implications about having many instances of the DevTools page versus one instance of the background page. That's particularly important as you do things like refreshing App Inspector when the page reloads, because you don't want to refresh App Inspector every tab, just the one that got refreshed. So to take a quick look under the hood, got about 5 minutes left on my 15 minutes here. What you see on the left-hand side is my App Inspector architecture. I've got an app file, which is my Sencha Touch app. Sorry, that's the parent folder for my app. And then an actual App Inspector folder, which is the Sencha application. I have folders for my background files, some DevTools files, and then all that gets wrapped into my manifest. So the manifest simply contains things like what is my background page, and it points to an HTML file. My DevTools page, again, is an HTML file. Any content security policy things I need to work with or work around. What permissions I want Chrome to give my extension. Things like that. The background page where I'll start, where all it does is it loads in a single background JavaScript file. That JavaScript file listens for when the page gets refreshed. We do this through a series of Chrome APIs, Chrome extension, and Connect. We listen for particular ports, and this is defined somewhere else, and I have to skip over this for a moment because it's a tad complicated. And then we have some logic that says, make sure we know what URL or what tab is being used at any given time, so again, we don't arbitrarily refresh the wrong page. And then we do some communication to our DevTools extension via post message. So that's the first mechanism of talking from your DevTools extension page to the background page. So you can also do the same thing to the inspected window. I don't actually do that in this application, but post message is really the guts and glory of how a lot of communication gets done in Chrome extensions. The DevTools page itself loads two files, a panel and elements. I'm going to skip elements right now because I didn't show that in my brief demo earlier, but with the panel, what we do is again use a Chrome API that says devtools.panels.create. And so this will create that tab that we see here as Sencha next to console. You can see that in new Sencha, I can give it an icon so that if I want running my DevTools dock to the right or dock to the bottom, those tabs look different. They all have icons, so I can give it an icon. And then I tell it what HTML file to load inside of my pane, or my panel. So that's app inspector index.html. That's just the same index HTML you would use for any launching for Sencha Touch or XJS application. And then you can do some other fun things like here's where I give my port name, get tab ID. This is where when the post message comes from the background page and the DevTools page, this is where I tell my panel to reload. So most of that inspector for Sencha is pretty straightforward. It's physically built with XJS5, so it's just any old XJS5 application running a tab panel, tabs off at the top. I've got icons in there. You can see I've got trees, I've got grids. None of that by itself is really groundbreaking. The only really interesting parts about App Inspector is how I access data of the expected window from my DevTools page. So I'm essentially 2 layers removed from the application code. Chrome actually gives me a really interesting API for talking with the inspector window. And this is where I said, thank God you all know and trust Sencha, because Chrome.devtools.inspectorwindow.eval is exactly what you think. This eval is arbitrary JavaScript code inside of the inspect window. But it does things in a way where you're given a closure. So, you give it a closure, some method that runs code in that eval expression, and then it expects that one of 2 things is returned by that expression, either data or an exception. So you see that my return callback expects either a result or an exception. If there's an exception, I catch it. If not, then I execute whatever callback function that I've defined inside of my callback scope. So I've got a nifty utility function that I call, of all things, eval. So that I pass it a closure, any arguments that I want to execute within that closure, and then a callback function, so that when this executes synchronously, so this is not asynchronous, by the way, it will run my closure, passing any arguments to it. This entire string gets eval in the inspected window, and then returns hopefully something useful to me, which then I use inside of App Inspector. So, as an example of what we do here, I might say that I want to load a component tree. So I would actually pass this load component tree method to my eval function, so that it would execute all of this logic from inside the context of the inspector window. So when you really think about this, if I'm supporting Sencha Touch, XJS4, and XJS5, I have to be very careful about how I write my code so that it's done using APIs supported by any of the versions that App Inspector supports. So in some cases, I need to sniff that out ahead of time. In other cases, I just need to do some very careful, binary operator statements that I know whether or not I can expect that to exist in any given framework. In my case, I might say loop through all the components that are present in the component manager, build a tree of objects, and then return them to the app inspector. And then at the end here, I would simply say return those nodes. This component node can show up as my result as that app inspector. So that's primarily how I do all of the data parsing out of the inspector window. The last thing I'll leave you with is yet another mindfuck on top of this process, which is in the case of, say, my events panel. I'll start recording this. You'll note that I said that Chrome DevTools inspector window email. This API given to me by Chrome is synchronous. How is it that I'm constantly grabbing new data as I interact with the application? I'm not, not telling this method to, go on a particular thing like a button click. Well, what we have to do is to actually inject code into the inspected window, then we run that on a loop for all intents and purposes using request animation framework, so that I don't completely overwhelm the GPU or the JavaScript engine of the inspected window. Then manually manage, which records have been brought in App Inspector, which ones haven't. When you really dig into the code, like I said, it's a bit of a mindfuck to wrap your head around this, but it's a really curious feat of engineering in that sense, where even though we're typically told things like eval or horrible practice, but the context of a Chrome DevTools extension, that's really the only option you have. Chrome locks down everything else, and so being able to do this and not screw up the client application is a very interesting problem. So, like I said, give App Inspector for Sencha a try if you haven't already. Download our super secret XJSI branch and give it a shot. That's all I got there. Do you guys want to ask questions now, or should I just pass the ball to Ryan? Yeah. Do you have any questions?
We have some questions.
Richard.
Are a lot of the developers within Sencha using this, or?
Yeah, so a lot of our engineering team has commented on it in their day-to-day development. I don't know if they need to, because they're not really building applications in that sense. They're knee-deep in source code and unit tests.
Right.
I suppose when they're working on some of our examples, they might, or the support team currently does.
Mm-hmm.
But the engineering team, they know of it. I don't know if they use it day to day.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, on the components tab, if you highlight or click on some random component, can you get that bound to a reference in the console? So don't crucify me, but we write a lot of Ember.js apps, and they have a very similar Ember Chrome extension, Ember respective thing, and then they have a view hierarchy thing. If you click on anything in there, basically the last thing you click on is bound to $E.
Oh, okay.
So then you can just you click on something, and then you can just have a reference to it right there on the console, so you can just walk around with it, which is hugely convenient.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought of. It would actually be pretty easy to do, I think.
Yeah.
So then you know that.
You could pop up a message box, or you could see what happens if you add a tab, or just being able to play around live is really useful.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that because usually the workflow we have would be so you find a component IP here, and in our case, you have to do get the CMP, whatever. But the dollar APIs are really easy to do. Yeah, so I can have here. Now what I'll do, I'll go to GitHub, and I'll add a feature request for that.
Just don't assign it.
So wish you dollar API. So I will assign that to me. Boom. Cool. That's the next one I did. Cool.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Awesome. Any other questions? No? Alright, let me pass the microphone over to Brian and as well as the screen. Okay, you're going to talk here, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to move over here so that when it's time, you're close enough to protect your microphone.
Alright, so here's my fancy 2 slides. That's it. My name is Brian Samson. I'm down here from Madison, Wisconsin, just visiting for the week and thought I'd stop by. I run a consulting firm. We do web and mobile applications, and we write a lot of Sencha stuff. More Sencha Touch lately, but we have a couple of EXT apps. Nothing in 5 yet, but it's like cool stuff. But so most of the stuff we do is like PhoneGap, Sencha Touch, and we also do like data development, and we're mostly like a Rails shop on the back end for just regular old web stuff. So I just wanted to talk really quick. I thought this was a good opportunity for just basically I have 3 little pieces of code in demo and kind of show off, and I number them backwards because they get lower and lower level as we go through. So I think the title of this talk was lower level visual effects and such stuff. So Sencha and Sencha are desktop EXT and Sencha Touch offer a lot of like really cool out of the box visual effects that you just get for free. You know, tabs moving back and forth, and animations, and grids, and accordions, just all kinds of really cool stuff that you need for free. And so, but every once in a while you want to do something more fancy. If you know, particular desire to get closer to your native or like specific kind of cool effects that you want. You know, at the end of the day, this is all running in the browser. You can kind of do whatever you want. So the first thing I want to show, this is basically just kind of a performance hack. So we have this schedule view that we wrote that displays kind of like a calendar. And you can kind of just go infinitely back and forth in the future. And so you could certainly implement this as just a regular Sencha carousel. So like we didn't do any of these effects, right? This is all just built in. You just call next, and then you get the full slide effect. But the problem is, if you have the ability to go infinitely back into the past and infinitely into the future, you know, you talk about performance, and that starts to get really slow really quickly. So then the way that we fix that is this screen. You can actually scroll it pretty quickly, and it stays performant. But this actually uses 3 of these views. This is like a custom little schedule view or whatever that we wrote, and it lives in this other view, which extends carousel. And then basically, it has 3 of these views that we call main, next, and previous. And then every time you tap, it just listens, it does the animation, and then when it's over, it just throws one of them out, and then physically takes that same component and moves it into the next, and then just kind of reorders. So like this is, you can see scroll future, there's a little swap variable, and then we move next list to current and previous next, and previous like swaps out or whatever. This is one of those things that like you can't be drinking water. So. But I was impressed at how quickly it's pretty straightforward and like not very tricky code, and it performs extremely well. And then obviously you have to repopulate, the list items every time they get swapped out of memory. Right? And this one has one still sitting over here at previous. So if we go back and forth, like nothing gets swapped out.
But as soon as that one's swapped out of memory, now that old one is sitting here unseen next to you. And so the next time it scrolls back into view, you have to, go do a little bit of work to figure out what's supposed to be on basically rewrite the screen. But it's still a heck of a lot less expensive than tearing it down and creating from scratch, or heaven forbid, just every time you click forward, creating a new one and then scrolling to it and you tear yourself like 100 things in it.
So are you caching all of those objects locally, or are they just dynamically?
Which objects?
So like if you go to like next, the one after that that doesn't exist yet.
So we always have 3.
There's always 3. So there's always one ready to be panned in from either side.
Yes, yeah. I'm saying like once you start scrolling things that were in view, now they're out of view. Are you caching those somewhere so you don't have to like recreate them?
So if it's the one that was in view previous stays in view rendered off the screen, and we don't touch it. So that one will come back and forth without any penalty at all. But once you scroll one more time away from it, then it gets thrown away and repopulated with whatever it's supposed to be. So like we're looking at the 18th here or whatever, on either side is the 19th and the 17th. And so they're already sitting there rendered. So you can see like in this code it's this reset dates. It shows through here and figures out what dates all the things are supposed to be and then configures the time slots for only the next and previous. Because we know that the one that is currently displaying, which we call meaningless, is already correct because it had to be, because it was already correct before we started scrolling. So, but yes, that's kind of a cool way you can get a neat visual effect that's pretty performant without actually having to do any work. Right? Like this is very low level 0. Just all of everything using the regular Sencha API, add, remove, etc., and then just really basic JavaScript stuff. So the next level of doing kind of cool stuff, and most people in this room probably know this, but Sencha on the Touch platform offers a gesture recognizer, a bunch of cool ways to just recognize various swipe effects that you have access to. So I don't know if I can actually demo this without logging out here. But basically, you can write about this much code, which is like nothing, in order to recognize swipe events. So I might have this here. Yeah. So here you can see if I drill down into this, that effect right there is just built into Sencha, and then you can either click this back button, but we wanted a quicker way to just kind of go backwards. On Android there's a back button and that works here. But on iPhone there isn't. So if you want a quick way, you can actually just swipe and then it'll go back. Because we just say on swipe, do stuff. If the direction is right, then you can just kind of do code. So you can recognize these kind of cool effects. The problem with that is that it's not discoverable at all. Right? Like there's no peek ahead. So I would like to rework this when I have spare time. This isn't like a huge groundbreaking feature that we're going to spend days fixing or whatever. But if I had the time, I would do that, where you can make it actually just kind of peek backwards so that it was obvious that swiping backwards does something, which in this case it doesn't. But still kind of a cool way to use kind of built-in stuff to detect swipes, and I think there are pinch and zoom out and all kinds of different swipe detectors that you can use to do all kinds of cool effects. And then the real deal is Sencha. So in these browsers, they actually will give you the browsers themselves give you raw touch move and raw touch. So that Sencha, the gesture recognizer from the middle one, that's how that thing figures out the direction of swiping. And they provide a nice easy API to access that. But if you want to, it's really actually pretty easy to get a hold of the lower level events. So, but you have to be prepared to do math if you want to do that, and you have to keep track of everything. So, the demo of this is we have this message page, and then this was actually a really fun development day. I had a new developer that works for me that we spent an entire day working on this. It was really fun. Hey, let's just see if we can get it to work. And we started like so basically. We started off with the just swiping. You know, we wanted like the feature request was the behavior on the iPhone where you can swipe left and then the delete button appears, and then you can like delete one of these things. And so we wanted to make that behavior. So we started off and it just like we just did like swipe left behavior. I got a little bit of error there. But it ended up like this, where you can actually just grab it and then slightly move it over, it rubber bands past, and it comes back, and then it leaves stuck with your delete button there, which is an almost exact replica of what the UI looks like. And then we know, like, if you're going to another thing, we just kind of close it down, and then you can also slide it back, you know, at your own speed or whatever. And this is, we spent a lot of time looking at the iPhone and how this works. This is almost a perfect replica of the user experience you get on a native iPhone app. And it was funny because I showed this to my wife, like I said, we worked on this like all day, and the number of iterations. We started off and we just swipe left and then like a button appeared. Then we swipe left and the button like faded in. And we're like, nah, we don't really like that. Let's see if we can get it so that we can actually swipe the actual, you know, the actual entire list out. And so we kind of got that working, but then it would still scroll up and down, and so it was just kind of all over the place. And then finally we got to this, and I went home and showed my wife, and she's like, okay, yeah, like, I've been doing that for since I bought the thing. I was like, but you don't get it, like, you did it. This one didn't do it, and now it does. It's really neat. Come on. We have it. So I just kind of wanted to dive into a little bit of code here and look at this. So we wrote this specifically as a plugin here, so that we can reuse it on a number of different screens, so it's not just tied to one thing. So basically, if you're familiar with plugins, they have an init method you install, you can pass the component that you're plugging into, and then you can just kind of poke around. So we put the delete div in there, which is going to live, like, quote unquote, behind table cell. And then we add a class so that we can target it with CSS, so we can generate large and things like that. These probably should be set up as like configurable variables in here, but they're not for now. So, and then basically the core of it here. So the item tab. This is the one that we use to like cancel out, you know, like the tier and somebody taps somewhere else and does this. So that's just a regular extension of that. So everybody knows about that. But this, if you drill down to the element, and you actually can listen to touch start, touch move, and touch end. These will give you the raw, like XY coordinates that the browser is actually dealing with, which is pretty cool. And it's actually kind of handy because these aren't quite the raw elements; they're very close. But I believe they're wrapped by Sencha to provide some extra stuff. Although, yeah, because I think that they gave you a little bit of extra useful stuff. So basically, on touch start, we do some initialization, keep track of where, so the event, like where the event started, X and Y, and then we make sure that the list is scrolled. So like the behavior that we didn't want to lose is if they tap on us, if they tap on our element and start moving, like our touch start fired and touch move is fired here, but it's obvious that I'm trying to like leave. We might be scrolling down. We want to maintain that behavior. And so we do that by on touch move, we detect the swiping direction. And so that's just really basic logic that says, you know, if we're swiping vertically, then or if we're not swiping vertically, then and we are swiping horizontally, then because we also get into this one where like you can start going down, and if you went left really quick, then the button would come up. So you kind of, when you're this low level, you really have to keep track of like literally everything that's going on, which is fine. You just have to test it a lot. But yeah, so basically, if we detect a that you're moving horizontally, and I think there's some threshold, yeah, this tolerance, which I think we defined as 10 pixels. So if you move it 10 pixels to the left before you moved it an equivalent or greater number to the up or down, then we decide that you're going horizontal, and then we start, like we set that firing, and we start that, this animation. So basically that's all the touch move does. It says, hey, if we're swiping horizontally, then find the row element and move it. And so the move basically we just call translate, which is a built-in Sencha function on Element that makes it. It uses the CSS3 like transform 3D properties and a bunch of JavaScript to basically just set the thing equal to, and so we just set it to like whatever the X is that we were at, which is like the difference from the X that we started on to the X that it is now. And then we have like some end caps where we say we don't want to let you go, you know, like if you go way over too far, we don't want to let you stop, and we didn't want to let you go over to the right at all because there's nothing over there. And so, yeah, just calling translate, like I was impressed at how easy that was to do. You just say, hey, essentially, like translate, and I don't know if that was a public API or if that was just something, but they use it internally all over the place and it totally works. And then I think the only other clever thing that we had to do, this function fixes an edge case. Why there's so much code. Oh no, so this is the function where if this gets called, this ensure row shows or hides the back button gets called on touch stop. So when you let up, if you haven't let go of the whole thing, it decides, hey, are you halfway or more? And then it animates it to the other direction. So this animate row, this one we have to get a little bit lower level, though it still uses the Sencha like anim class, which animates this in JavaScript instead of pure CSS. But you just say like, I want to animate from and to, and then you just pass it the CSS properties, and then it animates in JavaScript. And I think there's like a default time here, like 200 milliseconds or something like that. That was fine for our use. But we did the same thing over here. If it goes too far, then we cancel the event and we just translate the thing back to, you know, whatever setting practices here. So lots of cool little stuff that you can do if you know exactly what pixel value people's fingers are on and where they start and where they end, and you keep track of the whole thing. And then, you know, obviously there's like a super boring event down here that says, hey, if they just tap, you know, and this is like just regular extension of like actually fire, hey, so they click the button, or cancel it. So. Yeah, so that's all I have with that. I just thought it was kind of a cool thing that, you know, we worked on, and, you know, the Sencha frameworks do a really good job of finding a lot of really cool, clean out of the box stuff. But that doesn't mean that that's where you have to stop, because everything else is totally available to you, right? You know, like they wrote all those cool effects at some point in the first place using the same technology that we have access to. And so if you're willing to get your hands a little dirty and do a little bit of math, you can get a pretty good user experience right out of it. So. Questions or anything? Who knows that was 15 minutes talk to us.
That was good. We released that swipe with the meat thing as like a public plugin.
I saw one where you swipe and like the thing faded in. I didn't see anything exactly like this.
Yeah, I haven't seen one like yours. Yeah, I haven't seen this.
Because I think we found something like that. And it was like, it was close, but we really wanted to have the native feel. Right? That was one of the really coolest things about. I think when did the themes come out, like the iOS and Android specific? Was that 2.3? Something like that.
We've had
reasonably recent, 6 months or something, less than a year old, because they had iOS 7.
We've had separate iOS and Android themes for a while, but I know we've only enabled them like your app.json configuration within the last week or two.
Yeah, it's definitely like the last 1 or 2 releases or whatever. But you know, the closer this looks like, you know, it looks really close to regular native iOS 7 stuff already.
Yeah.
But you kind of get to that uncanny valley where it's like, it looks so much like it that everybody just expects it to be exactly like it, and then you end up with like, you know, white, like the swipe is like a big deal or whatever. And it's like, well, it's not a big deal. it's kind of weird. So,
That's very cool.
yeah.
Good stuff, thanks, Brian. Chad, you, context object, right?
Yeah.
What's on?
Gonna be more of an actual lightning talk, so
That's
it's gonna be pretty straightforward, I think. Sure if I ever actually thought about it before. Let me just Glendenin, I do a lot of Sencha consulting, Python stuff. This is going to be a pretty quick talk. It's just a method that I stumbled upon a while back. I was kind of curious well, I'll show you some of the approach that I take and we'll see if anybody has any other ideas. So the basic idea is when you have communicates components that need to communicate in the Sencha app, how do you handle that? It's inside used fire and event. It goes to the parents and controls up if you need to. It's a pretty natural way of passing events. Where it's not so obvious what to do is when you have other components that you communicate sort of across the app. One controller talking another controller, some service objects want to communicate or something. What do you do with that kind of event? And a few different approaches I've seen are application level events, having a separate event bus, and then context objects. So an application event, you just basically fire an event on top of a global application object, and anything in the app moves into it it wants to. If you look at the Sencha architect has some support for this type of event. The basic idea is if you want to just sort of broadcast an event to any interested listener anywhere in the application, just grab a reference to that global application object, like the controller used to do this type of application. You fire events and you call the event whatever string you want, pass some parameters to do this. And then the consumer just does the same thing. It's a reference to the application object and attaches the listener to that particular string. So I think personally, I think there's a few problems with this approach. Conceptually, or I don't know, I don't like that the application object is just used as dumping ground for everything. Another thing that's useful here is it's sort of acting as an event bus. Another problem is the events you fire on the application object. I mean, it's just a string, so there's no real easy way of scoping it unless you have some standard used internally, dots or cold or something. It's essentially one namespace for all events that you want to try to broadcast. And another issue is that it's because it's all sort of string types. If you have a typo or something, instead of being error, you fire an event, it has no listeners, nothing happens, and you're wondering, what is the part of my app is wired up? You can just do like a simple typo or something. The event bus approach is pretty similar. Just instead of firing events on the global application object, you have a separate utility class or something that you use disciplines. It's just another observable mix in, and you just fire events on that object the same way with global application objects. And you can listen to events on this object in the same way. One little benefit I think of this approach is that it's a little clearer about being explicit that this thing is an event bus. You're not just sort of randomly firing events on the application object. And then the last approach that I've seen, actually picked this up just working with the dev.js developers. There's a lot of context objects and maps, injecting things that people listen to. I think it might actually be something that apparently they're all Flex developers. I don't think this is something that Flex can do. But the idea is you just have a context object that's sort of like an event bus, but it's sort of by scope of the event. It's sort of different purpose. So it could be things like user events like logging in and logging out. It could be device events like user back button or a phone call comes in or something. Whatever particular, if you have a bunch of events that fall together for some reason, you want to put them all. And then the basic idea is you have a method that is an event, call a method that fires the events. And that's just a simple example of that. Like I just made up an example. You have some user session stuff, users should log in and log out. Maybe different parts of the app need to reconfigure themselves when the user logs in. These menus need to change, some other thing, somewhere else needs to change. You want to notify multiple points in the app, okay, user just logged in, you need to do something. So then you have like some user session context that you all listen. Any component that needs to know when the user logs in or logs out would grab a reference to this object and attach a list there and say, I'm just telling you whenever wherever user logs in. And it's basically a lot of overlay, right? Because the name of the method and log in is the same thing you have to fire log in. Using it instead of calling fire event, you actually call the method, which is the name of the event you want to fire. But on the consumer side, you just basically say you do the same. Listen to that event. And just some pros and cons of what I found with this method. I do kind of like that it's you're bundling events together sort of by what they're for. It's not all just in one global namespace. You don't have to hack the other namespace by saying like user underscore login and fire your global event. And it's a little bit less. So it's, I don't want to say type safety, but if you just call fire event, you get a string, and then it's a variant function. You can pass it in a parameter that can pass on to the listeners. So the problem is, if you just look at fire event, there's no way to static anything else. You know what it's doing. Unless you look at the string, the first parameter, you can argue what parameters you should stack with. So the downside is a lot of boilerplate, but like I said, if you use an IE, it's actually kind of nice because the IE can also have boilerplate and actually give you some help. And, So, I just packaged it apart and have all the functions going on here, but I have just a base class for my context. Just has a verbal mixed in, it's a singleton, and it just calls the instructor. These two have calls in in case you get a separate loss. I have a simple, it's basically the same thing. It's the user context, which has login and logout. And I did this with JS option here, which is using IntelliJ, which is sort of like it will parse the JS doc strings. It actually knows that. So it knows that this particular parameter is going to be an instance of app model user. It's a user model, so it can validate that for me. So I'm just going to make up an example, but. Context user and sorry, I know that these are my things like fire subjects. So I check some documentation. What is the string that I type it correctly? My ID knows what these events are, and I don't know where there's a typo. I'm calling that the existing exception or it's the exception fails at one time. And it's also telling me, okay, well, it's expecting a user parameter, which is the type user model. And if I do something like true, if I try to do something like this, it would always tell me that, okay, first of all, I got one parameter, which is the word events. So I say, okay, I guess that's the option. And talk, okay, well, it's actually expecting a user model, not who I'm passing on. So, what I like about this is just that maybe I have some kind of static language or something, but occasionally I do want some help when I'm coding, what are the parameters and I can write that value instead of just having to write a unit test to wait for some little exception. And finish up, there was one other idea. I haven't had time to actually explore this one that. It's just something I thought could exist. I haven't actually tried it. So one of the cons of the sort of static context of this is every event is every method. You do have to have multiple kind of array of methods and annotation things. So I thought, well, Josh was pretty dynamic language. Maybe I just have a base class a little bit more intelligent, just creates all these methods so that instead of having to manually create methods by hand, I'll just get a list of things, like these are the list of events I want to start to have, go and create them. So like I haven't actually tried it yet. I think it should work, but so I would lose my completion and go a little bit of static analysis because there would be methods creating methods a lot of time. Slight benefit in that at least personally, if I'm trying to fire an event that doesn't really exist, I'd rather do conception than fail. This is what I try to call all the time. So that's all I got for this, and I am curious if people have other approaches for this, or maybe a completely different non-event-based way for ones that communicate with or other people sort of problem.
So I would say that some of the apps or the library that I've written, I've never really thought of context objects as being a thing. But honestly, I think I probably used them without realizing that's what I'm doing. You know, is it just a pattern or a term that I'm familiar with? But you know, in the Azure extensions that I built for Sencha Touch, a lot of the authentication stuff is built that way. Although the way that I built them, you're not listening for the events on singleton. I put them onto the parent namespace, so it's more of a. I was trying to make the parent of the namespace, you know, the single point of interaction rather than having you as a developer to worry about which class was the context object that you needed to put the events on. Yeah, so using your logging example, that's almost exclusively what I did in Azure was you would call it ext azure auth.login. It would go do its thing and then it would fire a login event on ext azure. So it's not exactly the same thing, but I think, you know, compared to doing global event bus, it's certainly much closer to context. So I would agree that the event bus is certainly useful in some senses, but the lack of scope really hamstrings it. You know, you try to pass contextual parameters into the event bus. That's just extra work that again is easily problematic. So I'm not really sure how it's done in other languages. I guess I've never really gotten this far into programming in any language other than JavaScript, so I'm easily biased.
I'm definitely guilty of like abusing application objects. So just handle events. Like I hate it, but I don't really know where else to put stuff. Like I've tried using a controller, you know, like a user's controller, an authentication controller. You can get global and appline references to those. It's like I've tried using those and I've never really liked it. I think it's a cool way to do it. Just say, hey, this is the thing that there's firing events that are related to that. It doesn't do anything else, and it's a really compelling argument for making like using an IDE too. Because like I just sit down and like that was magic right there.
Yeah, what's the service? Oh, yeah, it actually works.
Yeah.
Guess there's stuff though.
It is a lot like some other programming languages, you know, like Android has broadcast receivers. You register a specific class to receive specific types of events. And then like you declare it in a different place, and then the system will call like it only uses that one class to broadcast like power related events, like low battery or whatever. I mean, you can make other things like have an interface that other people listen to it, but pattern that they push is like have one event that deals with this, one object that deals with this type of events. You know, I don't have to know how they structure it internally, but that's how like the listeners work over there. It's kind of a similar thing. It's just like yeah, have the user context, user event context, and also private user events. You have it.
I'd be curious to measure performance in both cases because I think in Next.js and Sencha Touch, when you put things into the global event space, I want to say the impact for performance could be noticeable in that when events get fired globally, the component manager, I think, has to move through every component to see if it's got something listening or receiving that event. But I would have to dive more specifically into this use case. I don't all of them. I've always tried to approach it from this maintenance issue, which is, if you jump into everything in global context, then maintenance is a nightmare in really large applications. So that's sort of get why in the Azure package, I always try to isolate it to word of package. So I would say, well, my package only has 7 events. So the odds that you're going to be able to build something with that package that's maintainable are pretty high. So at least, if nothing else, you can set a breakpoint at that root object and say, the events are all going through here. Whereas you can't really do that in a large application if they're all movable. The context elements are a really good idea. Stuff JS, I hope that is.
Smart guys.
Like a translator.
Yes. Any other questions for Brian, Chad, or myself? Plenty of pizza, plenty of beer, so make yourselves at home. Thanks for coming. Next month, what do we got next month? Let's see here. Give away some t-shirts. JS, I think. There's that conference. Everybody going to that conference? No? It's a good time. Be a good time. This is not far from you in Madison.
No, I'm actually going to be in Belgium with my family up until like Sunday before it starts.
Okay.
So we thought about just extending the hotel room and staying for the conference, but I haven't too much Wisconsin bells.
Did you go to that conference in the last 2 years?
I didn't know. There's like Madison has a really awesome Ruby conference in the middle or near the end of August. It's always like a kind of conference out. I have to do like 2 in the same month.
Yeah, I spoke at the first one and then last year as well. And I'm really bummed I can't go this year, but it's easily one of the best conferences I've been to.
I mean, I know a bunch of people that go, and it's like really cool because it's all disciplines and just everybody goes to it. I'll definitely bring it up there sometime.
Yes, and then August 14th, Sencha and Node.js from Salma Salas. She will be here to present that. So definitely look forward to that. And then in September, we got Nielsen at Schomburg presenting how they use Next.js. Before we leave, let's take a look at my awesome price control app. So today are lightning talks. Must be present to win. You probably haven't seen this yet, Brian. This is my prize control app, worst demo app ever. It's basically just a crappy number generator, crappy random number generator that connects to meetup.com. So,
I didn't even RSVP something.
oh, yeah. Yeah, go to RSVP. Otherwise you can't. Yeah, so you just pick people off the RSVP list. Must be present to win. This month I've got 2 Sencha t-shirts. They look just like mine. So that's all I got this month. Let me know when you're ready,
I
Brian.
think it's too late. I think I missed it.
You have to start, you can't.
Alright, let's see here. Ramundo, you're here. Chad is here.
All right.
I need 20 people here. Christine, you're not here. Richard Malone.
Okay, I'm gonna take it. Last time I won and I didn't accept the gift.
You don't have photos.
Because there were too many people.
Yeah, how do I know you guys are really
Yeah, you don't.
You need to see my ID.
Alright, thanks everybody. I don't know if we have anybody online, probably not. But, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. What I do have for you, Brian, is an awesome Sencha space sticker.
Nice.
Sweet.
So I will put the video up on the meetup site probably tomorrow at some point. Yeah, thank you for coming in. Appreciate you reaching out.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Shirt on now.
What's that?
Can't put the shirt on now.
Oh, you just want to see my naked body.
Okay, sure.
Oh, okay, I can leave it off there.
That's spot on.
You know what kind of hijinks goes on around.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I really like the.
And your brother's the boss.
Yeah,
we're
most of the time
working
it's
days.
Sean. It's serious trouble.
Lots of that house.
That's cool.
Are we off the air now?
Yes.
Okay.